Brisket is my absolute favorite cut of meat. It really holds such a special place in my heart, really because it's uncomplicated cooking, it's foolproof, it's fail-proof. Even the worst of cooks will have difficulty messing up a brisket. That's if you follow my instructions, of course. As the bride who knew nothing, brisket once spoke to me because of its ease, but I fell in love with it because of its taste. It's the first cut of meat I mastered, and actually the first meat that I tasted as a recovering vegetarian married to the king of all carnivores. It's the perfect culinary blank canvas. Quite like chicken, it will really take to almost absolutely anything you pair it with. In this course, you will learn how to make perfect, classic oven braised brisket with cumin roasted baby carrots, crispy shallots, and Hasselback potatoes with garlic parsley oil. Slow cooker marinated garlic honey brisket with wilted spinach and garlic chips, and spice rubbed slow roasted oven brisket with Texas style barbecue sauce and poppy seed slaw. I will demonstrate each technique through 3 of my favorite recipes and walk you through how to gain kitchen confidence so you can go ahead and create these recipes on your own. And as an added bonus, I'm throwing in my best brisket ebook featuring my top recipes with special header notes, reinforcing the lessons and expanding on the techniques and concepts taught in this class. Okay, so if you want to get cooking right away, jump to the end of this first lesson, and that's where I'll walk you through the basic equipment list, and then at the top of lesson 2, you're going to get your brisket on, meaning we're going to start cooking. But for more background on brisket, hang with me right here, and I'll answer questions like, what is brisket? Where does it come from? Why is brisket such a tough cut? And I'll share my 3 golden rules, just like I promised, for braising, slow cooking, and slow roasting brisket. And I'll tackle topics like the brisket Jewish connection. So here's your chance, jump ahead or hang out. All about the cut. So what is brisket and where does it come from? Brisket comes from the chest of the animal. It's the meat covering the animal's breastbone between the foreleg and below the short ribs, aka the flanken, which like brisket is another very popular Eastern European cut. So a whole untrimmed brisket can weigh more than 14 pounds, and trimming it will reduce the weight to about 10 to 12 pounds. So that's this big mama that you see here. So brisket is generally sold in halves. Butchers cut it crosswise in half, cut at the place where a thick layer of fat runs diagonally through the center. And just so you know, people are always wondering what's crosswise versus lengthwise. So lengthwise, of course, in any kind of recipe that you hear in cooking goes the length of the ingredient, whereas crosswise, you're gonna cut something short way across it. So that's crosswise. So second cut, also called the point, contains more interior fat and is coarser. The extra fat carries flavor in preparations like corned beef and barbecue, producing more succulent meat. So the point is thicker and fattier than the flat and actually sort of like resembles or comes up to a point. The point is also sometimes called the decal in barbecue circles, just trying to keep you armed with all the information. So a whole untrimmed brisket just like this, both flat and point, is referred to as a packer cut, and it's almost always what's exclusively used for barbecuing. A packer cut will have fat running through the middle and even a thicker layer than you see here, a thick layer on top called the fat cap, and that will keep it moist while it's cooking. Why is brisket such a tough cut? So the rule is the closer a cut is to the back of the animal, the more tender it will be. So the meat in the forequarters, like brisket, is tougher because meat is muscle, and the animal uses the muscles in the front of the body more often and more vigorously than it uses those in the back. Front muscles get the most exercise from walking, grazing, lying down, and standing up. So how do you make brisket tender? The mantra is low and slow. Say it 10 times, then say it again. You're gonna hear me say it at least 10 more times in this lesson. In fact, if I had to boil this lesson down to a single secret for perfect brisket, it would be low and slow. Tougher muscles benefit from low, slow, moist heat cooking methods that will loosen the connective tissue. All muscles contain some amount of collagen, often referred to as connective tissue, because collagen is what binds muscles to one another. A tough cut like brisket contains a lot of collagen. In fact, more connective tissue or collagen than any other primal cut of meat. As you cook these tougher cuts low and slow in moist heat, collagen breaks down and forms gelatin, and proteins come out and flavor the water or your cooking liquid. So that's the reason for our low and slow cooking mantra. So while there are 1,000,001 brisket recipes, there are essentially only 3 cooking techniques: braise, barbecue, brine. It's that simple. And these are your temperatures. For low, your oven temp rarely goes over 325 degrees Fahrenheit. For barbecuing, your smoker temp hovers around 225 degrees Fahrenheit, and your slow cooker is going to be around 210 degrees Fahrenheit. Now the time is slow. Brisket's best friend is time. If you're braising a brisket, you're talking about at least 3 hours in the oven and longer in the slow cooker. A barbecue brisket can be in a smoker for 13 plus hours. Brine can be up to 3 weeks for corned beef. We're going to skip over barbecuing and brining, as hopefully in the future they will each be their own course, and they definitely deserve it. And we're going to focus on braising, slow cooking, and slow roasting. My 3 golden rules for braising, slow cooking, and slow roasting brisket. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on braising, slow cooking, and slow roasting here because each of the recipes in this lesson were created to demonstrate each of these techniques. So I'll go into greater detail as we make the recipes together. I just want to offer a simple definition now and my 3 golden rules. So what is braising? The simple definition is gently cooking under cover with a little bit of liquid. It's a low and slow moist heat cooking method that's most often used for tough cuts of meat, although in theory you can even braise veggies. Tough cuts get their intense flavors from their bones and their densely packed muscle. These cuts require liquid and slow cooking to release their stellar flavors and succulent texture. The tender cuts of meat, like those cut from the rib or the loin or the tenderloin, not available kosher in the US, will never be more tender than they are raw. And the whole aim in cooking them is to preserve as much of that original tenderness as possible, as fast as possible at high heat with the meat rare. And conversely, tough, sinewy cuts from the most well-exercised parts of the animal, like the brisket, the shank, and the shoulder, are the opposite, exactly the reverse, and must be cooked low and slow if they are to become tender. Rich, concentrated flavor from a low, slow cooking session of tough cuts of meat can happen in a nice oven braise or in a slow cooker. So braising, slow cooking, and slow roasting require planning ahead. So we're talking about time and patience, but thankfully not a lot of work. My 3 golden rules. Number 1, brown before you braise. Each dish benefits enormously from browning the meat first and adding aromatic vegetables, a flavorful liquid, and some seasonings. Number 2, rest after you rub, at least for 1 hour, ideally for up to 24 or even 36 hours. Your rub and your seasoning can simply be salt and pepper, a 50-50 ratio known as a Dalmatian rub in barbecue circles, or a spice rub if desired. The salt is going to penetrate the meat, season it from the inside out, and firm up the meat a little bit. But more importantly, it actually starts to tenderize it ahead of the braise, and that's particularly useful for hearty, tough cuts like brisket. Number 3, wait a day. If you can, wait a day to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Now, I confess we're guilty of breaking this golden rule often in my house. We can't help it. But like super stew, a brisket generally tastes better a day or so after it's made, so all the flavors have a night to marry. The brisket Jewish connection. As explained by famed historian and food anthropologist Gil Marks, he should rest in peace, in his tomb Encyclopedia of Jewish Food, the often impoverished Eastern European Jewry utilized this once cheap, tough, less desirable cut of meat. The Jews of Eastern Europe could rarely afford to live high off the cow and to buy the more tender cuts from the rib and the chuck. With great ingenuity, they learned how to make do with the cheaper, less desirable parts of the cow, such as the brisket. Talented cooks, out of necessity, discovered ways to convert brisket from a less desirable object into a juicy, tender, incredibly flavorful piece of meat. In Eastern Europe, cows were costly to keep through the winter as well. Therefore, those unnecessary for reproduction, milk, or hauling were commonly slaughtered around Hanukkah, resulting in a sudden temporary surplus of meat. For the generally impoverished Eastern European Jews, brisket became the most widespread Eastern European Hanukkah entree. Eastern Europeans also used brisket as a base for chulent and the Sabbath stew and simmus. In early 20th century America, as Eastern European immigrants began rising up the socioeconomic ladder, they started serving their favorite foods more frequently. Brisket would often appear for Sabbath dinner and other special occasions, including the Passover Seder and Rosh Hashanah high holiday meals, converting a rare treat into a regular Shabbos and holiday fare. And as Jews started to move around the country, the recipes for brisket and otherwise started to take on the local flavors and use decidedly American ingredients. You'll see brisket with recipes with ketchup, cans of soup, Coca-Cola, miso chili sauce, and so much more. Among non-Jews in America, brisket for a long time was a disregarded cut of meat, particularly given away or used for ground beef, except in Texas. In Texas, brisket means succulent barbecue. So let's talk tools. I'm gonna walk you through everything you need to make perfect brisket, starting with a Dutch oven, or a comparable oven-proof ceramic enamel-coated cast iron pot with a tight-fitting lid, or simply you can use a baking dish with tinfoil. Now the benefits of a Dutch oven is it's a heavy-lidded pot. It comes in various shapes. It goes from the stovetop, which is perfect for browning and braising, right into the oven. Cast iron, once it's hot, and the heat is really steady and gentle, so that's really a great benefit, and it lasts forever. The advantage of an enamel coating is it's easy to see when you're browning your main ingredient, and it also allows you to easily evaluate your drippings. It doesn't need to be seasoned like a straight up cast iron pot, and it's super easy to clean. It comes round and oval, and I like the oval for brisket. Just one important note, this cast iron Dutch oven is super duper heavy. So keep that in mind. That plus the weight of the brisket might make you decide that you just want to use a regular baking dish with tin foil. Next is a slow cooker. You want something that's about 6.5 quarts. I've used many brands of slow cookers over the years in 2 different countries and can tell you that I've been pleased with all the results. So just a nice, good quality slow cooker, like I said, about 6.5 quarts is perfect. An oven thermometer, not a meat thermometer, an oven thermometer. Don't trust your oven dial, check it. Tongs, an extension of a cook's arm, my favorite tool in the kitchen. A sturdy meat fork. Tongs are good for grabbing certain pieces of meat, but a meat fork together with the tongs, if needed, is better suited for heavy, unwieldy pieces of brisket. It really just depends on how big the brisket is. Don't worry about piercing the brisket before, while, or after it's been cooked. The juice loss will be minimal. If you stick a fork in brisket, it's basically a series of tubes filled with juice. Your fork might burst one, but not all. I'm really gonna use this meat fork also to test for doneness. You're gonna need a long arm handle or wide mouth spatula, which is also especially helpful for pulling your brisket out of the slow cooker in one piece. It's gonna be super soft. So again, wide mouth spatula or a long handle is gonna be really helpful. Here we have a large cutting board with a well. Now, this is not necessary, but great, because basically when you slice your brisket, you're gonna get a lot of the juices kind of spilling out over, because it's super juicy, onto your counter, so this kind of catches all of the juices. This is a great built-in groove. A long, sharp knife, okay? Briskets are large and can have a tendency to shred when you slice them, particularly around the edges. So a dull knife is a no-no. You want a knife that's at least 10 inches long, or a good carving knife, a chef's knife, even a serrated knife will do the trick. And of course, if you have an electric carving knife, like my hubby's grandma, it's the perfect time to whip it out. You'll need some cheesecloth for a bouquet garni, and butcher twine, which you'll use to tie off your bouquet garni. A wooden spoon with a flat edge for deglazing and scraping the bottom of the pot and getting all that flavor off of the bottom. A pepper grinder, one of my favorite kitchen tools, and no kitchen is complete without a little kosher salt. Now, most chefs around the world cook with kosher salt. It's not just for a kosher kitchen. I use it for all of my cooking and most of my baking. Crunchy, coarse flake sea salt can be good for finishing, but kosher salt for cooking is the way to go. Keep a small dish of kosher salt near your stovetop and season liberally and often as you go for beautiful layers of flavor. Salting at the end is just not the same. Okay, so a pan or baking sheet large enough to hold your brisket with edges for the meat to rest and all the drippings, especially if you're browning vegetables in batches, and the edges on the side, make sure that your drippings don't go all over your counter. A strainer over a saucepan to strain the sauce for more elegant sauces and to remove the aromatics, with the aromatics and without straining will produce a more rustic sauce, and we'll also use the saucepan to season and reduce your sauce. Tasting spoons. Basically, taste as you go. If you don't taste as you go, it will never turn out the way you want it. A garbage bowl. I love having a garbage bowl or a garbage can close by. Medium-sized prep bowls over here for your chopped aromatics. Paper towels for pounding your meat dry. You're gonna also want plastic wrap or 2-gallon sealable plastic bags. This is for keeping your new meat overnight in the fridge, especially when you're marinating it. Measuring cups, the obvious, liquid and dry, and measuring spoons. So that's it. That's all you need. Now it's time to start cooking.